Imagine a land gripped by famine, where the crops have failed and the fields lie barren under the harsh sun. Families who once thrived on the abundance of the land now face uncertainty, hunger, and fear. Among these families is one from the ancient nation of Israel, a family whose story of love, loss, and loyalty will echo through the ages. Naomi was a beloved wife and mother, married to a man named Elimelech. Together, they had 2 sons, and their life, though humble, was filled with hope and promise. But when famine struck their homeland, they made a difficult decision, one that would change the course of their lives forever. Seeking survival, they left everything familiar and traveled to a foreign land called Moab, where the wheat fields could still grow and feed their family. Before we get so deep, can you please hit that like button and subscribe to show love and help us grow in the environment of God? Yet, in this strange land, tragedy awaited. Elimelech died, leaving Naomi alone with her 2 sons in a faraway place. Her sons married Moabite women Ruth and Orpah, offering Naomi new sources of hope. But soon, fate's harsh hand struck again, and both sons passed away, leaving the 3 women widowed, bound together by grief, but facing an uncertain future. This is not only a story of loss. It is a story about choosing hope over despair, loyalty over self-interest, and love that transcends borders and traditions. It's a story that teaches us about the power of relationships, faith, and the courage to embrace the unknown for the sake of those we love. As the sun sets on the empty fields of Moab, Naomi prepares to return to her homeland, ready to start anew. But what will Ruth do, her daughter-in-law, her companion, her friend? Will she leave everything behind? Will she stay? The choice she makes next will define her life and change history. The path ahead was uncertain, the road back to Bethlehem both familiar and foreign to Naomi. After years in Moab, she was returning home carrying the weight not only of her own sorrow, but also of the loss that had shattered her family. Without her husband or sons, Naomi's future looked bleak. In a world where a woman's security often depended on her male relatives, she was vulnerable. As she prepared to leave Moab, Naomi turned to her daughters-in-law Ruth and Orpah, young women who had stood faithfully by her side through the darkest days. Naomi urged them to return to their own mother's houses and find new lives. She knew the hardships of widowhood and did not want them to be bound to a woman with no future in the land they were about to leave. Orpah, tearful but understanding, kissed Naomi goodbye and returned to her family, choosing the safety of her own people. But Ruth lingered. In the silence of that moment, Ruth made a pledge that would echo across time, a pledge born of love, loyalty, and faith stronger than blood ties. "Do not urge me to leave you or to turn back from you," Ruth said, her voice steady but tender. "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried." Her words were more than a promise. They were a covenant of the heart. Ruth was choosing to leave behind the land of her birth, her family, her gods, and her future security. She was choosing Naomi and embracing not only Naomi's people but Naomi's God, her faith, and her destiny. It was a decision that could bring hardship, alienation, and great sacrifice. Naomi was overwhelmed. She saw in Ruth the rarest kind of love, a love that was not bound by obligation but chosen freely, fiercely, and forever. Together, the 2 women set out on the journey back to Bethlehem, a journey marked by hope, uncertainty, and the beginning of a new chapter. This moment speaks powerfully to relationships of every kind. True loyalty, Ruth shows us, is not just about proximity or convenience. It is about the courageous commitment to stand by those we love, even when the future is unclear. It is about embracing the unknown together, bound by faith and heart. The journey from Moab to Bethlehem was not just a physical trip. It was a pilgrimage of hope, grief, and the search for a new beginning. As Naomi and Ruth approached the gates of Bethlehem, the city was alive with the bustle of harvest season. Fields golden with ripe grain stretched to the horizon, promising provision and renewal. Yet Naomi's heart was heavy. She warned the people of Bethlehem not to call her Naomi, which means pleasant, but to call her Mara, meaning bitter, for she felt that the Almighty had dealt bitterly with her. The death of her husband and sons had left her feeling empty and broken her dreams in ruins. For Ruth, though, Bethlehem was a land of unfamiliar faces and customs. She was a foreigner, a Moabite woman in a close-knit community. Yet she carried with her the promise she made to Naomi to stand steadfast, to belong, to trust in Naomi's God. This was her new home, and she was determined to make it a place of hope. To survive, Ruth took on the humble and difficult task of gleaning leftover grain from the fields during the harvest. It was a modest way to gather food, but it spoke volumes about her character, her willingness to work hard, her humility, and her determination to care for Naomi. In the fields, her story intersected with that of a man named Boaz, a wealthy and influential relative of Naomi's late husband. Boaz noticed Ruth's diligent work and her respectful demeanor. He saw beyond her foreign status and recognized the loyalty and kindness that shone through her actions. Boaz extended generosity and protection to Ruth, instructing his workers to leave extra grain for her and ensuring she was safe. This encounter marked the stirring of something more profound, an unfolding story of redemption, where love and faithfulness begin to open doors previously closed. It was a reminder that God works through relationships in mysterious and tender ways to restore hope and build futures. In this new land, amid the golden fields of Bethlehem, Ruth and Naomi began to rebuild not just their lives, but the foundation of a love that would echo through generations. As the days passed in Bethlehem, Naomi watched Ruth work tirelessly in the fields, gathering enough to provide for both of them. But Naomi knew the harsh realities of their situation. A woman alone, even a faithful woman like Ruth, faced many uncertainties in a community where family ties were crucial for protection and provision. Naomi, wise and resourceful, began to formulate a plan to secure a stable future for Ruth. She spoke to Ruth one evening, sharing the ancient tradition of the kinsman redeemer. This was a relative who had the responsibility to marry a widow of a deceased family member to preserve the family name and estate. Naomi's hope was that Boaz, a close relative, would fulfill this honorable role. Naomi instructed Ruth to go to the threshing floor, where Boaz would be winnowing grain after the harvest. Ruth was to wait until Boaz was ready to rest, and then follow Naomi's instructions carefully, a bold and risky move for a young woman. This plan was daring and depended entirely on Boaz's willingness to act as redeemer. When the night came, Ruth approached Boaz quietly but confidently. She lay at his feet, a gesture of humility and appeal for protection. Boaz was surprised but honored by her request. He praised Ruth for her loyalty to Naomi and for not seeking younger men, but choosing to honor her family through him. Boaz promised he would do all that was necessary to redeem her, declaring her a woman of noble character. However, there was an obstacle. Another relative had a closer claim to Naomi's family land and status. Boaz would need to resolve this matter before proceeding. Still, his commitment to Ruth and Naomi was unwavering. This part of the story teaches us about the importance of wisdom, courage, and faith in navigating relationships. Naomi's strategic thinking combined with Ruth's bravery and Boaz's integrity set the stage for a powerful act of love and redemption. It reminds us that sometimes relationships require patience, trust, and taking bold steps even when the outcome is uncertain. The responsibility of being a kinsman redeemer weighed heavily on Boaz's heart as he considered his role in Naomi and Ruth's lives. Understanding the sacred duty placed upon him by tradition and the laws of Israel, Boaz went to the city gate, the center of legal and community affairs in Bethlehem, to resolve the matter formally. At the gate, Boaz called together the town elders and the closest relative who had the first right to redeem the land and take Ruth as his wife. In this gathering, Boaz presented the situation clearly. Naomi's family estate was at risk, and the opportunity to redeem it and marry Ruth, the widow of a relative, was offered to the near kinsman first. The relative listened carefully but ultimately declined the responsibility. He expressed concern that redeeming the land and marrying Ruth might jeopardize his own inheritance. His refusal was formal and irrevocable, clearing the way for Boaz to act. With the legal obstacle removed, Boaz courageously declared his intention to redeem the land and marry Ruth, thereby protecting Naomi's family legacy. He promised to take Ruth as his wife and preserve the name of her late husband. This commitment was more than a legal duty, it was a powerful act of love, compassion, and faithfulness. It reflected Boaz's integrity and honor, qualities that deepened Ruth's trust and showed God's providence at work through human relationships. Soon after, Boaz married Ruth, and their union brought joy not only to themselves, but also to Naomi, whose life was transformed from bitterness to blessing. Ruth gave birth to a son, Obed, who became the grandfather of King David, linking this humble love story to the great lineage of Israel's history and the unfolding story of God's promises. This final part of the story reminds us that true love and loyalty often require courage, patience, and the willingness to take decisive action for the good of others. It shows that God's redemptive plan often works through everyday acts of faithfulness in relationships, creating new beginnings out of hardship and loss. The story of Ruth and Naomi is much more than an ancient tale. It is a living lesson about the power of faithful love, loyalty, and trust in God through life's most difficult seasons. Ruth's journey from a foreign land to becoming part of God's chosen people teaches us that true relationships are about sacrifice, courage, and embracing others fully heart, mind, and spirit. Naomi's transformation from bitterness to joy shows the hope that comes when we allow God to work through people as faithfulness and kindness. Boaz's role reminds us that love is not passive, but active, taking responsibility and standing up for what is right and just. For every listener today, this story invites us to reflect on our own relationships. Are we willing to commit with unwavering loyalty? Can we sacrifice comfort for the sake of others? Do we trust God's plan even when the path ahead is uncertain? May the example of Ruth and Naomi inspire us to build relationships that mirror God's love, relationships grounded in faith, hope, and restoration. And may we always remember that in the tapestry of human connection, God's redemptive hand is at work, weaving new beginnings out of life's brokenness. Thank you for journeying through this beautiful story. May it strengthen and encourage every relationship in your life. The story of Ruth and Naomi is much more than an ancient tale. It is a living lesson about the power of faithful love, loyalty, and trust in God through life's most difficult seasons. Ruth's journey from a foreign land to becoming part of God's chosen people teaches us that true relationships are about sacrifice, courage, and embracing others fully heart, mind, and spirit. Naomi's transformation from bitterness to joy shows the hope that comes when we allow God to work through people's faithfulness and kindness. Boaz's role reminds us that love is not passive but active, taking responsibility and standing up for what is right and just. For every listener today, this story invites us to reflect on our own relationships. Are we willing to commit with unwavering loyalty? Can we sacrifice comfort for the sake of others? Do we trust God's plan even when the path ahead is uncertain?